Thanks all of you for coming. Hi, Internet. So, yeah, thanks Maxon for having me. So, today I'm going to present you Keys. Keys is a short film I did 1 month ago, and the first part of the presentation will be the showing, like the screening of Keys and like who am I, what I do normally. And the second part will be actually diving into Cinema 4D and do a live demo about what I did to do the shading for some of the keys. Now, I'm doing 2 presentations, so my next presentation is tomorrow at 12 o'clock in noon. So I will there show something different than today. So if you're interested in seeing different stuff, then you might be interested in coming again tomorrow. So, but let's get started here. I'm already distracted by the booth. So this is my presentation. So first of all, who am I, what I'm doing? So I am Raphael Rau. You may know me as Silverwing. I'm a 3D journalist and a compositor. I do mostly full CG compositing, so I'm not really aware of like how green screen keying and stuff like that works. And normally I do animations, stills, and visualization, so purely 3D stuff. If you want to follow me up, then it's the internet, silverwing-vfx.de, or at Twitter, it's Raphael Rau. To get an idea what I normally do, I have brought my reel. Unfortunately, it's from 2014, so I haven't been able to get a new reel online for 2 years. So, but I think it's still okay to show, so have fun with my reel. Just open that. Here you go. Thank you. So yeah, shout out to Redstone Music who did the compositing, the composing of the music for that reel. So thanks for them. He had this nice soundtrack. Right, let's go back to the presentation. All right, so Keys. Keys, as I said, is an experimental short film that is about 2 minutes and 30 seconds long. It was created in Cinema 4D R18, and you might think, how is this possible? R18 just surfaced a couple of days ago, but I'm a beta tester, and therefore I have access longer to the R18 release. And what better to test a new software than with a live project? So I did that with R18. It was rendered with Octane. If you're familiar, Octane is a render engine that based on GPU renders, so graphic cards. And it gives me great flexibility in render. And we actually dive in Octane later, so you will see what it's doing. Another very important point for me is the music done by Simon Damborg. When he delivered the music to the final cut, the project came alive. So thank you for your music, Simon. So for those of you in the internet, I know that the stream might be a bit more less in quality, so you can go to vimeo.com/silverwing and watch the video in high quality, full HD. So because I know that the stream can be laggy sometimes. All right, so let's go ahead and screen Keys. So here we go. All right, so that was Keys. So we have to go through a short thank you procedure here. So thanks to Simon Damborg, as I mentioned, he did the music, awesome soundtrack. If you have need for a composer, just contact him. Then Thomas Fieler, hi if you're watching. He's a colleague for me. We sit together in a bureau in the office. So We are both freelancers sharing an office, and he has some additional GPUs and also some good advice sometimes. So it's nice to just sit there with him. And then Sebastian Pienta, who did the additional modeling of some parts where the deadline was very tight and I had some additional tasks that I couldn't do. So he willingly applied to do that. All right, then Cornelius Demmerich, you might know him. He's the guy who did the picture with the telephone booth and the astronaut. A lot of guys know him, so we normally talk to each other and help out each other with our artworks. And then finally, the guy who is responsible for bringing Octane to Cinema 4D, Ahmed Oktar. He is really talented programmer and he is very fast in implementing stuff. So one of the reasons I use Octane is because of him. So thank you. And then finally, of course, Maxon for having me here. Right, so everyone loves a couple of facts for short film. So rendering, I measured that on one graphics card. So normally we have a lot more graphic cards, but just to have an overview, took between 5 minutes for the log scene and 60 minutes for the pillar scene, where the pillars and the smoke. So some of you might think that 60 minutes is a long time, but I rendered everything in one take. So there's real rendered motion blur, real rendered depth of field, GI, multiple scattered volumetrics, and particles in there, all rendered in 60 minutes per frame on one card. Of course, we have a lot more cards. So 6 workstations with 14 CPUs were used to render keys, and they took 5 to 6 days to render the whole film. So if I would need to render that again, it would take like around 5.5 days. And the production time was roughly 1.5 months. Now I had some jobs in between this, so I don't know the time exactly, but I roughly calculated it to 1.5 months. So software used, as I said, Cinema 4D R18, then Octane Render. Then I used Substance Designer especially for the floor and some other elements of the scene. Then After Effects for compositing and Premiere for editing. All right, so this is the point where we start with our live presentation, or not quite, but let me just show you this. And I'll need to turn down the audio here. So I did this funny making of video here where the screen is split into 3 equal parts. You can see the wireframe, then the raw render, and the final result. And you can see that the raw render really isn't that far off from the created result, from the final result. And this is because I tried a new thing, or not a new thing, but I tried this thing with keys to render everything in camera. So I didn't rely heavily on multi-passes and stuff like that. So I just wanted to have the experience of having the scene tweaked at a level that I just can render it, and it's already looking good. So in comp, I don't have to do complicated deep compositing techniques and adding the volume and stuff like that. So I just could go ahead and do more like a real production workflow where just color correction comes after the rendering and then everything's done. In some scenes, I rendered the volume as an extra element, but in most scenes, I rendered everything together, especially in this one here. So even the particles are part of the final result. So they're not an extra layer in Photoshop, in After Effects to overlay that. Like most people would do that in particular. I just create cloned objects with MoGraph in the scene and render them with motion blur and everything. So yeah. All right, so next off, let's really jump into Cinema 4D. And it will take a bit to open. I should have opened that beforehand. And it's not Maxon's fault that it opens so slowly. You can see it's initializing the plugins, so have quite some plugins installed there, mostly render engines. So here we go. So what I want to show you today is the texturing of one of the keys. Now, let's just start up Octane. Remember that I'm presenting this on a very small laptop, so this is not the power you get with a desktop graphics card. It's a 960M graphics card, and it has an Octane bench of around 30, I think. And if you have a 980 Ti, it has a bench of 130, so keep that in mind. And normally you have 2 or 3 of them in your system. So it still renders quite fast because it's just one key. And doing the texturing here, I wanted to create something that really gives us the feeling that the keys are older and they're lying there for some time, but also they have used edges where you touch them, the rust is taken off and the metal is coming through. And also on the other hand, where you have the concave parts, that the rust is thicker on these parts where the rust can sink in, so to speak. So last year, I don't know if someone visited here last year, you did. So I showed how to do this edge technique with a dirt shader. And this time I did basically the same thing, but there was one problem. So let's jump into a new material. Let's get this here right. Sorry about the mix-up. All right, so I will also use the node tree quite a bit. Just hopefully it doesn't confuse you too much, but normally it shouldn't confuse you. It's rather simple reconstruction of the material than what you get with the Octane standard material workflow. So let's just go ahead, and I want to have the concave parts here filled in with something. So the thing that I do is use the dirt and plug it into the diffuse. And right now it's doing nothing because the radius is very small. So I just increase the radius here, and hopefully, well, it's maybe set it to 6. And then also set the strength to 6 maybe, and then you can see that something's happening here. So those are the parts of the key where I want the rust to settle in later. Now, there's a fundamental problem with live shaders like that. So if I would create just a polygon here, you can see that the polygon also affects the dirt. And that might be okay for an overall key lying there for, like, I don't know, 30 years. But within the bowl, the keys are stick together, and I don't want them to affect each other at the parts. So I needed to find a solution to lock down the dirt for just the key, not interacting with anything else but the key, but this one key. So I did a UV unwrap. Let's just stop Octane and show you the UV mesh. So I did this for all 7 keys, and it's a bit time-consuming. I've been asked to show how I do UV unwrapping, but you don't want to see me fiddling around 15 minutes with UVs, so I rather show the shading. I think it's more interesting. So to get the effect of the dirt baked down into a texture, I need a UV mesh because the shader needs to know where in the square to put what information. So, all right, let's go back to Octane. Now I want the other Octane, the one with a small window. Here we go. So how do I get this information into a texture? Now this is rather simple. You have to have an Octane object tag that you place on an object. And in the object tag, you have the bake ID. And this is the ID you mark the object with, and it needs to be the same within your camera, because you use the camera in Octane to bake down textures. In the camera, you can set the camera type to baking. Normally, it's set to thin lens, where you can have a normal display, normal perspective like we have right now. So as soon as I go into the camera, you can see that I am now baking, or I'm rendering to the UVs rather than to perspective view. Now there's a thing that's left in here that I don't like. Right now I'm rendering all the lighting situations in the picture, so we have light and shadow also in there. And I don't want that, because I want to render light and shadow live, but I just want to render my dirt out. So what you need to do is going to the Octane Render, to the render passes, enable them, roll out the beauty passes, and go to diffuse filter. And the diffuse filter just renders you the color information of one path without influence of the light. So let's just do that. Let's just go ahead and bake that out. So I already prepared the output to be 1280 by 1280. And so I'll just go and render that to the picture viewer. And don't mind that you, in the picture viewer, see the lighting reference, because you have the multipass here where your other render is, or your render without the lighting information is stored. So I don't want to render too long, because we don't have that much time. So I just finished that render after 20 seconds. So let's just abort it, and then just jump to the pure diffuse pass, and then save it out on the desktop as keys bake AO. Here we go. And now I want to do just the same, but with the convex edges. So I want to have, like this right now is the map where you need for the rust, where the rust sinks in. And now I bake out the map where you make the metal surface appear. So I just go back into my material here, duplicate the dirt. So I have my old dirt. And in that one that's right connected, I just invert my normals. And that means, actually that's an effect Cinema 4D has right now too. So it's possible to do that in Cinema 4D R18. All right. So let's see what we've got. We've got a black key, so obviously the radius is too high. So let's just get this down to 0.4 or something. Yeah, that seems nice. Maybe 0.3. All right, so we get our black edges here where we want them. Now, this effect isn't as critical as the other one, because the rays are shot inside the key, so intersections between keys is not that they don't show up that much, but still I want to bake that. So I go back to my baking camera and just do the same as before. Just render it out to the picture viewer and wait for it for another 20 seconds. So that's what you do. That's what I do all the time. Just hit render and then wait for 30 minutes drinking coffee. So yeah, that's a good thing, being a 3D artist. Of course, the bad thing is making the client understand that there is render times. So here we go. And let's just call that inverse AO. OK. So now that we've done that, I'll just move out the camera, start the live viewer again, and then create a new material. So we want to create rust. And I want to use the node tree again. So for rust, I noticed that it's very regular pattern, so I used the noise to create it. Now, let's just apply the right material to it. Here we go. So right now you can see that the noise is applied to the key. We get like variance in colors, but you can see the UV seams in here, and we don't want that. We want a continuous move of the noise field. So what I can do is just go ahead and go to the projection and set there a projection that is 3D. That means X, Y, Z or UVW coordinates. So we get a 3D noise representation. Now, I have done this before, and I know that the 3D noise representation is rather big, so I need to scale that down, and I want to log my ratio so I have an equal scaling for all three axes. Now, there's another cool thing with the live viewer. You can exactly see what your noise is doing while you're still sliding. And that's really nice. So it speeds up your workflow quite a lot. Let's go with 0.1. The last thing I want to do with the noise is to raise the omega to get in a little bit more details. I'm not going into detail what the omega is doing especially, but it's just blending the octaves differently. So this doesn't look like rust at all right now. This just looks like a noise. So to get it more looking like a rust, I throw in a gradient. And the gradient is, for those of you who know Cinema 4D, it's more or less a colorizer. So I will just colorize this to rusty colors, brownish tones. So what you can do here is, or what I want to do here is, I want to get pure range from black to white. And this darkest point here is not black, so what I want to do is just move that in until we get a black value. And that's around 25. No, not 2, 25. And also get the white color in there, so it's about 90. Okay, and then I start to get in the rust colors, so it's like not that much saturation, maybe a brightness of 30. And that one also should be around 20, 30, 50 or something. So right now, this looks much more like rust looks. But there's missing something, as rust is very aggressive. It eats away substance from the material, from the surface of the key. So we want to also get a bump in there. And to get a bump in there, I just get the same noise and pipe it into the bump. But if I do that, the bump is much too strong. So what I normally do to keep adjusting that or to keep control over that is to create a multiply. I stick the multiply in between the bump and the input, and then it's just basic math. So if you have a float texture, that just gives you a numeric value. And if you multiply something by 0.5, you get 50% of what it was before. So you can already see that the bump is a bit less, but I want to get even more bump away from it. So let's go to 0.03 or something. Something like that, maybe 0.007 or something. Let's not fiddle around with it too much. Yeah, that sort of looks nice. Okay, so let's consider our rust material finished. Now, it looks nice if you're close up, but if you have the whole object visible, it looks very like the surface isn't broken up into different shapes. It's just the shader is like spreading across very uniformly across the whole surface, so it doesn't look realistic. So to make it realistic, of course, that's the reason why we baked the textures out in the beginning. I just name that Rust 1 and duplicate it and name that Rust 2. And then I just go in here and just lower the brightness to maybe 15 to, I don't know, 30. So it's basically just darker. Maybe I want to just make the noise a bit bigger. So we get the different look also in the noise. And then we have to mix those two. So there's a mix material where I can just mix two materials together. So if I open that, we have material 1 and material 2. And I'll do just that, get my rust 1 and my rust 2 in there, and then assign it to the material. So right now the rust is just mixed 50-50, but I have baked the textures before. Now one small disadvantage with the node tree is if you bring in multiple materials, it gets a bit messy. But if you know what you're doing, you can tidy it up quite quickly. So let me just do that. I'll just right-click and select hierarchy of one of the materials and move it down. And therefore, you just have tidied up. And instead of this one, which gives us the 50-50 separation between both materials, I just want to bring in an image texture. Now, for an image texture, you want to consider if you have a black and white or a colored texture. If you have a black and white texture, you can set this to float. And this will then bring in to the graphic card's memory only the gray value picture instead of a RGB picture, which has 3 numerical values and therefore save you 2/3 of your memory from the texture. So it's very viable if you have 8K textures or something like that. So you can save like 150 megs per texture. And if you don't have a lot of VRAM at your hand, that can be a lot. So let's go to the desktop and let's choose that one. And you can already see that it takes effect. So that we have darker parts here, but maybe we want to get them a little bit stronger. So I do what I always do and get a gradient in between. So I don't want to have a rust color in my gradient, so I just reset that. And then just get it in between that. So right now nothing changes, but if I just clip the blacks a bit, you can see that the effect increased, so we have a little bit more dark rust in the creases or in the concave areas. All right, so you might have already guessed it, but we will do the same, of course, with our metal texture, so let's be rather quick about it. Now for a metal texture, I'll just explain how to do that. I go to the diffuse, get the diffuse. I'll just create a glossy material. Go to the diffuse of the glossy material and turn it to black, because metal normally doesn't have any diffuse. And then I'll go to the roughness and then just turn it up a bit. Also, the index should be a bit higher. We don't want to have too shiny metal, because that would counter the effect. Like normally the used parts of the key where you touch it are not that shiny. So that should do fine. And of course we use another mix material, and let's call that mix rust, and that one mix metal. Here we go. And we will do the same. So you're not limited by just using standard materials in the mix material, so I am actually mixing a mix material right now. So I do that. Of course, now if I apply that to the key, we get our 50-50 shader again. So we have 50% of the noise mix and 50% of the metal. And our node tree is a bit messed up right now, so I'll just have to clean it up again. But we already know what to do. Here we go. So I'll just copy that tree over to the new mix and then just exchange the texture. So we called it bake invert AO. So yeah, that works. And then just move that to the mix amount. Somehow I have to do a little troubleshoot. Maybe it's because of that. Yeah, so let's just move sliders and see what's wrong. That's also a great thing of the live viewer. So I just applied the metalness to the convex edges here. So, and if we have a too strong look for that, we can always adjust it by sliding the slider around and maybe lighten up that color so we get an even more rusty look to that part. Now that doesn't look perfect, but I only needed like 15 minutes for that, and for my original keys, it took me 1 day or half a day to get the shader right. So I also did for example, we have still a bit of time. So if you think that this part here is still looking too uniform, that it's not realistic, you can just add more detail by adding another noise to it. So let me just do that by going ahead, getting in a multiply, and then copying that noise and changing the scale, maybe. So the other cool thing that you can do is just to visualize what you're doing, is just to get rid of the gradient and then just show you the noise. All right, so here we go. And this is right now, I haven't planned this for my presentation, so I'm just experimenting here. And then you could go ahead and check, and that's my favorite thing, like the gradient. I always use the gradient. And then just clip a lot of the whites and make the darks stronger, so you get those dark patches in here. And if you then pipe the rust effect again here, you get some variance in here. So you have the normal structure of the noise that we had before, plus the darker parts here that make the noise look more realistic. All right, so that's the part where I explain the shading. The next thing I've been asked a lot is about volumetrics, because in keys there's a lot of volumetrics and volumetric rendering in there. I decided to show you how I set up the volumetric inside of Octane. Now, I actually have the original scene here, and it also it renders actually inside of Octane on my laptop, but it's very slow. So let's just open it so you can see. So that's the scene. Let's turn on the volume. Let's load it into our graphics card. Will take a bit longer because there's more geometry to it. And still waiting. It was working in the hotel room before, so hopefully it will work now. Yay, we see something. So we can see that this is the original scene from the film, and I have some clouds in there. You can roughly see them here, and some overall fog in the scene that creates the God ray effect. So as you see, this is quite slow right now on my laptop, so I will just build up a scene with one pillar and one floor element, and then show you what I did to render this in Octane. All right, so let's just stop Octane again, hopefully. Come on. All right, so let's just close that scene. I'll just use, no, I don't want to use the key scene. Sorry for being a bit messy here. I just want to use a new scene. So I just create a polygon as a floor object, make it a bit bigger. Then I'll just create a cylinder as a pillar object, make it a bit smaller maybe, or a bit higher. Let's make it higher. There we go. And then also create a light and render, so it looks nice. Well, nice is not the right term, but it looks, you can see something. That's what I wanted to say. So right now, to get in the volume, I have here all my Octane things, so I can access them rather quickly, but you have to go to the Octane settings here. Sorry, let me just find them. Here we go, and create a volume. And that will create a box where the volume lives inside. So let's just make this box a bit bigger. Maybe 5,000 was a bit big. 500 should do. Here we go. Right now, this box is just black, and it doesn't look like a fog at all. So what you need to do is go to the Medium tab and create a fog. And this will create an Octane medium where it imitates fog. Let me just get a light a bit further off, and you can see that it's creating something as a volume. Right now, the volume is much too thick, so I also need to go into, the medium, and lower the density maybe to 0.5. Right now, you can see that's much more what we want to go after. So that's looking like a fog, a proper fog. And let's just move the volume a bit more in that direction. Hello. I'll just turn it off and on again. For my scene, I also made the area light a spotlight by using an IES light. So inside of the light, you can just click IES, and this will get you Octane IES loader in here. So I'll just use that to create the spotlight effect. So I'll go to scenes and then to pillars and load my IES. And as you can see, this now is very directional. So if I move that further away, you can see that the light became very directional. Now, a spotlight is also mostly a smaller light, so I just set the size of the light to 50 by 50. And I want to make it brighter to see something. So also, let's move it up a bit and tilt it down back so we get our spotlight effect. Here we go. You immediately can see that the desired effect also takes place where the pillar is casting a shadow inside of the volume, making those God ray effects. So the last thing I want to show you before I finish my talk is how I did the clouds. So I just duplicate this volume. So right now we have two volumes overlapping in the scene. I just move that second volume up and then make it smaller, maybe 100. And actually in the volume there's a very nice effect you can use, and it's in the Generate tab under the texture. So if you go to the texture and just load a Cinema 4D noise in there, it will generate a density based on the noise. Right now, we will just disable the second volume so you can see it better. Also, out of experience, I know that the noise is rather small, so I'll just increase it to 1000 and make the contrast inside of the noise a bit bigger. So you can see there's something forming here. And if it's not showing up in the live viewer, just enable and disable it. Right now, this is quite subtle, so I want the clouds to be bigger. So I'll just go inside of the medium and make the density higher again. So let's just use 500. So here we go. We now have some clouds. Maybe the clouds look too flat. There's not enough detail in the noise. So what you can do is change the noise type. Sorry for clicking around here too often. I want to go to the volume, to the Generate tab, to the noise, then maybe choose wavy turbulence. And therefore you get like a more detailed, cloudy look here. And the actual cool thing is that also happened within my scene. Of course, you get shadows from the clouds. So if I go, you can go in this view, you can see that the clouds are casting, of course, shadows. And the other thing is the clouds themselves cast God rays inside of the volume below. Right now, the volume might, or the light source is a bit dark. So let's do something about that. Let's either get the light source brighter. Yeah, let's just get the light source brighter, I guess. So you can see that there's a cloud layer above, and then this is interacting with the light, and then this light actually takes the information down to the volume here, creating an interesting lighting pattern. Hopefully you got something out of my presentation. Sorry for the trumpiness. Somehow I was more nervous than I thought I would be. But right now, that's the best opportunity to have some questions. So if you have any questions, as I said, now would be the right time. So thank you all for being here. And yeah, some questions. So first question. No, the question was if I'm supposed to keep the light outside of the volume. No, that's not the case. You can also have lights inside of the volume. I just noticed that they render longer if they are inside because you have very high intensities around the light source, and then they create fireflies. And there is, when you do that, there's a longer render time involved. So I thought to be smart and keep it outside the volume. All right. Yeah. Yeah. There's the question how I did the spiderwebs and the keys. Actually, I will show that tomorrow. So if you come to the booth tomorrow, 12 noon, I will show that there. Yeah. So maybe you want to see keys one more time. I don't know if you're interested, or if you just don't show that boring stuff again. All right, so I'll just play it one more time. Here we go. Oh, sorry, the audio's turned off. right. Thank you. Sorry for the lag in the video. I think Octane was rendering in the background. So, all right. Cool. Thanks. I'll be around here for a couple more minutes.